The story begins with a young boy named Yazid. Yazid was an orphan living in poverty, but he had big dreams of becoming the greatest pastry chef in the world. Since he didn't have much money, Yazid would often sneak ingredients from a small store to practice making cakes. Years passed, and by the year 2000, Yazid was 16 years old and working as a trainee in a fancy restaurant in Paris, France. On his first night shift, Yazid struggled a lot. He was clumsy and made many mistakes because he was new. While the head chef was giving instructions to the other cooks, Yazid accidentally made a lot of noise while washing dishes. This annoyed the chef, who called Yazid over and decided to fire him right away. But before the chef could leave, Yazid bravely asked for one last chance. He asked the chef to test his skills first. Yazid promised that if his dessert was good, he should be allowed to stay. Everyone in the kitchen was shocked by Yazid's courage. The chef, although angry, agreed to try. Yazid quickly made a dessert. While it didn't look perfect, the taste amazed the chef. Impressed, the chef decided to give Yazid another chance. He told Yazid to come back in 2 days and warned him not to be late. Yazid was overjoyed and couldn't wait to tell someone. On his way out, Yazid accidentally walked through the main entrance of the restaurant instead of the staff exit, making the moment a little funny and showing just how new he was to everything. When Yazid arrived at the orphanage, he found a poster of his favorite chef lying crumpled on the floor of his room. His roommate told him they didn't like the poster. Angry, Yazid got into a fight with the roommate. Because of this fight, Yazid was called to the headmistress's office. The headmistress scolded Yazid for always causing trouble. She mentioned that Yazid not only fought with his roommate, but was also caught stealing someone's car. Luckily, since Yazid was still underage, the police weren't involved. However, the headmistress warned Yazid that if he kept behaving like this, he would be sent to another orphanage. Instead of feeling sorry, Yazid boldly asked for pocket money. The headmistress sighed deeply and didn't say anything. That afternoon, all the kids at the orphanage went to school as usual. During class, Yazid was busy drawing in his notebook instead of paying attention. He had always loved art since he was little. After school, while his friends were playing together, Yazid chose to stay alone in the art room. He liked fixing things there, like a broken mannequin. While working, Yazid's mind drifted to memories of his childhood. Back then, he lived with his mom and baby brother. His mom didn't pay much attention to them. To her, having kids was just a burden. Once, she even tore Yazid's shoes to make them look old and worn, so people would feel sorry for them and give her money. Thankfully, Yazid had some happy moments when his uncle Pascal and Aunt Simone would visit. They often took Yazid out to play, bringing a little bit of joy to his tough life. One evening, when Yazid was playing at Pascal's house, he watched his cousin making a beautiful cake for a school project. Yazid was amazed. His love for art started to show. Whenever he got the chance, Yazid's cousin would teach him how to bake. From that moment, Yazid dreamed of becoming a pastry chef, someone who creates delicious desserts. One day, while Yazid was at Pascal's house, Pascal told him some sad news that Yazid's little brother had passed away. When Yazid went home and saw his mother, he noticed something strange. She didn't look sad at all. Yazid realized his mom felt relieved, as though her burden had become lighter. That night, Yazid's mom became jealous. She saw how much happier Yazid was when he spent time with Pascal and Simone. Because of this, she told Yazid he couldn't visit their house anymore. But soon, Yazid's mom admitted she couldn't take care of him alone. She decided to send Yazid to an orphanage. Pascal and Simone felt bad, but couldn't do anything since they didn't have the right to stop her. The next day, after school, Yazid excitedly told his friend that he had passed a test to work at a fancy restaurant in Paris. Yazid said his new job would start the next morning. Hearing this, Yazid's friend was happy for him and wished him the best. At night, Yazid didn't have money for his trip. Feeling desperate, he sneaked into the headmistress's office and took money from her drawer. As he left, his friend, who had been with him, asked Yazid to join him for a quick deal selling something. His friend promised it would only take a few minutes. Reluctantly, Yazid agreed. When they got to the meeting place, Yazid felt uneasy. The deal was taking much longer than expected. He kept thinking about how he needed to get home soon to prepare for his job the next morning. But suddenly, the police showed up and arrested everyone, including Yazid. he had to spend the night in jail. The next morning, Yazid's mom was called to the police station. Because Yazid was still underage, he was released. Even though they hadn't seen each other in years, Yazid's mom hadn't changed. On the way home, she kept yelling at him, calling him useless, and saying awful things. Yazid couldn't take it anymore. He shouted back and ran away from her. When Yazid returned to the orphanage, the caretaker scolded him for leaving without permission and asked where he had been. The caretaker, who had looked after Yazid since he was little, cared for all the children like they were family. He always saw Yazid as special because Yazid had big dreams and determination. Unlike the other kids who just wanted to play, Yazid had a spark in his eyes. The caretaker warned Yazid to stay away from bad influences. After the talk, Yazid got ready and headed to work. But on his first day, he arrived late. At the restaurant, the chef greeted Yazid coldly. Yazid apologized sincerely, explaining that he had traveled 180 kilometers just to learn how to make desserts. The chef, however, simply replied, "That's not my problem," in a strict tone. Feeling disheartened, Yazid was about to leave, but then the chef called him back. The chef decided to give Yazid another chance, which made Yazid feel relieved and grateful. That afternoon, Yazid returned to the orphanage and fell asleep right away because he was so tired. Meanwhile, in the office, the headmistress was arguing with the caretaker about Yazid. The headmistress wanted to send Yazid to another orphanage because of the trouble he caused, but the caretaker stood up for him. The caretaker firmly said that if Yazid was sent away, he would leave the orphanage too. The next day at the restaurant, the chef started teaching Yazid how to make desserts. The chef explained that there was no special secret to making delicious cakes. The key was to put your heart into it and practice a lot. Yazid felt very inspired. But that night, Yazid got home so late that he missed the train and had to sleep at the station. At school the following day, Yazid's friend told him that the caretaker was at risk of being fired for defending Yazid. Hearing this made Yazid feel guilty. He didn't want others to suffer because of him, so he decided to leave the orphanage and called Pascal to pick him up. At the restaurant the next day, Yazid was given the chance to make a dessert for a customer for the first time. Before he started, the chef encouraged Yazid, saying he shouldn't just be a regular chef but an artist. Yazid worked hard, but when the dessert was finished, he realized he had accidentally made the same cake as another chef. The other chef suggested comparing their cakes to see which one was better before serving it to the customer. In the end, Yazid's cake tasted better, and all the chefs praised his talent. After work, Yazid didn't want to bother Pascal and Simone by staying at their house too often. Instead, he decided to live on the streets, even though it was tough, so he wouldn't trouble anyone. Day by day, Yazid kept working and learning at the restaurant, preparing for a big national chocolate competition. When the competition day finally arrived, Yazid finished his chocolate sculpture, which he had worked on for days. He was confident it would win, and he dreamed of getting a certificate and a big cash prize. With Pascal's help, Yazid carefully carried the chocolate sculpture to the car. To his surprise, Yazid's mom showed up to cheer him on. 7 years later, Yazid had grown up and was in a rush to get to work after taking a quick shower at a public bathhouse. Now, Yazid worked as a sous chef at a luxurious 5-star hotel. In a kitchen, there are many levels of chefs. Helpers, regular chefs, chef de partie, sous chefs, head chefs, and the executive chef, who holds the top position. When Yazid arrived late at the kitchen, Julian, one of the chefs and the grandson of the hotel owner, punished him. Julian banned Yazid from cooking for a whole week and made him handle only the fruit supplies. Even though Julian was just another chef, he acted bossy because of his special status. Not even the head chef wanted to argue with him. Yazid was annoyed but followed the orders. That night, instead of going straight home after work, Yazid relaxed at the beach with his friend Manu. After clearing his mind, Yazid returned to the kitchen to practice late into the night. The next day, a very important guest named Bouchard sent back his food, saying it didn't taste good. The head chef asked Yazid to make a new dessert since she believed Yazid was the most talented chef in the kitchen. At first, Yazid refused, reminding her that he was only handling fruit supplies. But after the head chef kept pleading, Yazid finally agreed to help. During a break, the head chef told Yazid that Bouchard was very impressed and wanted to meet him. When they met, Bouchard thanked Yazid and said the dessert he made was the best he had ever tasted. Yazid felt incredibly happy hearing such kind words. After work, Manu secretly followed Yazid to a hill behind the hotel. Manu wanted to know why Yazid never went home. When Yazid noticed, he finally admitted that he had been sleeping on the streets. Yazid explained that he was saving his salary to compete in the World Dessert Championship instead of renting a place to stay. Manu encouraged Yazid, saying that sleeping on the hill could be fun because of the beautiful stars. The next day, while working, Julian unfairly scolded Manu for no reason. Yazid, angry that his friend was being treated badly, stood up to Julian. The head chef saw the commotion and called Yazid over. She gave him surprising news that the hotel management had decided to give Yazid a room to stay in. This happened because Manu had spoken to the management earlier that morning. Yazid was overjoyed that he no longer had to sleep outside. While checking his new room, Pascal called Yazid to remind him that Simone's birthday was coming up. Yazid promised to make a special cake for her. Before ending the call, Pascal also shared sad news. Yazid's mom was very sick, and the doctor said she didn't have much time left. Yazid was silent after hearing this. That evening, before going home, Yazid stayed at the kitchen and made a birthday cake for Simone. He sent it to her as a special gift. The next day, the executive chef came to inspect the kitchen. At first, everything seemed perfect. The kitchen was clean, organized, and the desserts met the hotel's high standards. The executive chef even praised Yazid, calling him the most talented chef in the hotel. But as the inspection continued, the executive chef found rotten fruit in the kitchen. Since Yazid was in charge of the fruit, the chef became furious. Soon after, the head chef called Yazid to the back room. She told him that his mistake had put the hotel's reputation at risk. With a heavy heart, Yazid was fired. Without arguing, Yazid returned to the kitchen and confronted Julian, who he believed was behind the incident. Yazid suspected Julian wanted him gone to take over his position as sous chef. In anger, Yazid punched Julian. Manu, who was nearby, quickly stepped in to stop the fight. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Simone visited Yazid's mom and brought her a cake that Yazid had made. Seeing how much worse her condition had gotten, Simone could only pray. As Yazid's mom tasted the cake, tears rolled down her cheeks. She began to think about all the mistakes she had made as a mother. A few days later, Yazid started working as a bartender. While serving drinks to a guest, he unexpectedly ran into Bouchard, who was sitting alone. Yazid bravely offered a deal. He asked Bouchard to sponsor him in the World Dessert Championship, promising to work as a chef in return. When Bouchard asked why he should agree, Yazid confidently replied that if he won, the whole world would know that the best chef worked for Bouchard. Impressed by his determination, Bouchard became interested. 6 months later, the selection day finally arrived. Manu, being a loyal friend, drove Yazid to the competition. This event would determine who would represent France in the World Dessert Championship. But, as usual, Yazid arrived late. When Yazid stepped onto the competition stage, he was surprised to see Julian as one of his rivals. Once all the contestants were ready, the selection began. In the middle of the process, the power at Yazid's station went out because too many ovens were running at once. Panicking, Yazid quickly informed the organizers. Time kept ticking, but eventually the power was restored. Before continuing his work, Yazid remembered what a mentor had once told him to not be a chef and just be an artist. Turns out, the selection ended with Yazid as the winner. Along with 3 other chefs, Yazid was chosen to represent France. The next day, the 4 chefs held a meeting to divide tasks and discuss the dishes they would prepare. Because of Yazid's impressive performance during the selection, the team gave him extra responsibilities. Yazid would not only help bake and decorate the cake, but also carve the decorative sculpture. After a long discussion, they decided to create a sculpture shaped like an eagle. During the preparation, Yazid practiced tirelessly, while Simone regularly called to update him about his mother's worsening condition. On the day of the World Dessert Championship, the competition hall was packed with supporters from different countries, cheering loudly. The participants all looked confident as they prepared their creations. Manu and Bouchard were also there to watch and cheer for Yazid. Once everyone was ready, the competition began. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Pascal and Simone received heartbreaking news that Yazid's mother had passed away. In the competition hall, after finishing the appetizer and presenting it to the judges, the chefs moved on to the dessert. Yazid began carving an ice block to create his decorative sculpture. As the eagle-shaped sculpture was nearly complete, Yazid suddenly felt a deep silence in his heart and mind. Looking toward the audience, he thought he saw his mother watching him. In that moment, Yazid realized his mother had passed away. The anger he had always felt toward her slowly turned into gratitude. Without hesitation, Yazid decided to change the design of his ice sculpture. When Yazid finished his new sculpture, everyone in the hall was amazed and deeply moved. The French team quickly arranged their dessert, decorating it with Yazid's ice sculpture, now shaped like a mother with angel wings. They presented it to the judges. After the judging was complete, all the chefs gathered to hear the results. Third place went to the team from Belgium, second place to the team from Japan, and first place, the winner of the World Dessert Championship, was announced as the French team. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is stealing sugar might sweeten your cake, but it could also land you in jail.